Right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to Thursday, week 6. Yeah, I don't know. What should we talk about today? I haven't written them yet, so I can't necessarily talk about them. Would you like to make some requests?
Yeah.
Okay. What sort of quiz questions would you like to request?
Simple ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something that you talked about a lot, not something like we've only seen we don't usually talk about it too.
Okay, so something. So make
some things you just skip through, but some things you talk about a lot.
Okay, I do try to ask questions about things that we've talked about and that are more important. I try not to pull just random details out of nowhere. I do try to do that, but I will keep that in mind. Other requests?
Don't make it too difficult.
What's that?
Don't make it too difficult.
Don't make it too difficult? Why not?
Because why would you?
Don't you want a sense of accomplishment?
No,
You don't want a sense of accomplishment?
I don't want
You do, what do you want?
easy test.
An easy test. Don't you want to grow from this experience, Nicholas? Don't you want to?
I'll go sometime.
You'll grow sometime?
Not now.
When they're later on, when there's. Yeah.
Just
Is that the consensus that none of you want to grow at the moment?
not now.
Just not now? There only is now. That's all there is.
Who said so?
Oh gosh, who said it? Something, something like the past is a memory and the future is a fantasy, and all you really have is the present moment.
No.
No, not true. Okay. So we'll proceed with our class here, and maybe we'll grow a little by accident. Maybe. Adonna's here. Good morning to you. Michelle is here. Good morning, Michelle. Ivan is here. Good morning, Ivan. Hadil is here. Good morning, Hadil. Noah is here. Good morning. Good morning, Noah. And Adil's here as well. Good morning to you. Yesterday, we watched a little more of our India documentary, and we were talking about a few characters who we should remember. The first of which is kind of the first Indian ruler to kind of put together an empire and sort of rule over all of India, named Chandragupta Moria. So you can see here he's born about 300 years BCE, before the Common Era. Looks like he doesn't live that long, does he? Yeah, kind of a young guy when he dies, right? But we know of him from a number of different sources. You can see from Greek sources, from Hindu sources, and Buddhist and Jain texts. And we heard a little bit about his story, about how he kind of rises to power. He allies with these Nando kings. He overthrows them and sort of takes control of most of India. But then later on, he sort of gives up his kingdom and becomes a monk. What's that? Who's what? Did he become a Buddhist or a Jain?
That's Ashoka.
No, Ashoka was kind of leaned in the direction of Buddhism, but I thought, didn't the documentary say that Chandragupta became a Jain monk and he starved himself to death in a cave? Well, I think someone who practices Jainism to a fairly extreme degree. So he was sort of denying himself food, and he was just sort of meditating in a cave kind of thing.
But if he was meditating, how did he end up in the battle?
Well, I think that was at the end of his life that he wound up in the cave. So at the beginning, he was kind of, he was sort of your very typical king, waging wars and cutting off heads and ruling an empire, and then he gave that up to kind of go into exile and search for a deeper meaning to the universe, and died in the process. But he did set up an empire that his grandson Ashoka would inherit, right? But Ashoka was kind of a different, well, actually at the beginning he wasn't a different type of ruler. He was a very similar ruler to the ones that we probably are familiar with, who rules by the sword, capturing territories, cutting off people's heads. We heard in the video yesterday that he created an elaborate torture chamber to murder his enemies, which seems like a cruel and awful thing to do. But at some point in his life, he renounces violence, right? And so the narrator of the documentary takes us to the kingdom of Kalinga, where Ashoka's armies laid siege to try to take over this piece of land. And the story goes that Ashoka, after the battle, felt that, this is a disaster. Like, even though he won the war, he felt that there were no winners, right? Everyone loses in war. Everyone is either killed or loses people they love, and it's just awfulness for everyone, right? And so he kind of goes on a bit of a spiritual journey to try to, kind of reimagine how he might rule an empire. And so he kind of travels around, he talks to a lot of people, he meditates beneath the Bodhi tree, just like Buddha did a couple hundred years before him. And he comes to this idea of he is going to rule not by force, but by virtue, right? He's going to create an order within his kingdom that is based on nonviolence and respect for people and for animals, and some kind of maybe brotherhood is not quite the case, but he sort of positions himself as the father of the kingdom, right? And again, it's a very common thing for a leader to do, but it's a very uncommon thing for a leader to attempt to lead through nonviolence. And I don't know the story very well, but I wonder to what degree Ashoka was an influence on Gandhi, because Gandhi has a sort of a similar path in which he becomes a lawyer. He's a British educated lawyer, but he adopts principles of nonviolence to convince the British to leave India and allow it its independence. You look like you're smiling there a little bit.
According to you guys, Gandhi is a good guy, but if you research more about him, he's the evil.
Yeah, he's got. I know he's a much more conflicted, there's more to him than just the sort of heroic ideal that the West.
Kind of a murderer.
That I don't know about. What are you referring to?
It was someone else who was leading India to independence, so he wanted to be the one high. He ordered the British, I think, to kill that person. So he started leading ahead.
Interesting. I don't know that story. I know he was, he's not the, the West likes to see him almost as like a saint kind of thing, and I know he's not that. That story I didn't know about. That's very interesting.
He's following the other person's principles, just.
But he wanted the glory.
He wanted British to rule still India. Well, then when they saw that India is getting independence, he ordered that other person to be dead, and then he started saying, I'm the one.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that part of the story I don't know, but I'm going to look into it. I'm going to look into it now because I'd like to. But he was certainly, I'm not sure if he borrowed ideas from Ashoka as well, or if this other guy borrowed from Ashoka. But the principle of nonviolence is very similar as well. That's what the narrator was sort of talking about in the film, is that it's such a powerful idea, but maybe I need to dig into it a little bit more.
Wasn't Ashoka before Gandhi came?
Oh yeah. Was he before? Yeah, like 2,000 years before. Yeah. Right. So Ashoka kind of creates this kingdom based on virtue, and again he's trying to convince everyone to live according to these principles of goodness, right? Of making sure that people and animals and other living things do not suffer, right? So he's borrowed a little bit from Jainism, he's borrowed from Buddhism, and he's trying to create a kingdom or an empire that's based on kind of logic and reason and sort of alleviating suffering, rather than, do what I say or I shall, cut off your head sort of thing, which is often what you see with leaders. We talked a little bit about what Jainism was, either yesterday or the day before. Again, it has some similarities with Buddhism in that it's kind of a trans-theistic spiritual system or approach where gods exist, but they exist within a universe that is kind of not entirely within their control, right? So we don't have a god that is on the top that controls and creates all the universe. We have the universe that exists and operates kind of on its own, and gods just exist within that universe just like we do. They just happen to be more powerful than we are. And so we said Jains kind of adopt these religious premises, or they hold these things to be true: non-violence and the many-sidedness of experience, and non-attachment to material things or to transitory states, and asceticism, right? So the denying things that the body needs in order to clarify the mind, if you will. We saw some of these already. I'll just jump through them. And yesterday we watched the film, and I asked you a few of these questions. And so we saw in the film that Ashoka had kind of almost been forgotten, at least by written scholarship, until James Prinsep started to decipher some Brahmi script that he discovered, right? And he started to work out what the text said, and it told the story of this great ruler, right? This great leader. I believe this is part of the text that he deciphered, but I'm not really sure, but you can kind of see what it looks like. And again, the story that was told was the idea that Ashoka was this king, the head of this empire, who is reformed after a war. It's kind of a redemption story, isn't it? It's kind of, in a way, it kind of reminds me of Gilgamesh, where Gilgamesh was kind of this bad guy, but then he is redeemed in the end. And I feel like the Ashoka story follows a similar kind of path, where Ashoka's waging wars and building torture chambers, but then he has a change of heart, and he adopts these new philosophies and tries to rule in a sort of a more sympathetic and moral way. I don't know this for sure, but I wonder if the Ashoka story fits into the hero's journey. I wonder if it can be understood that same way. So Ashoka sits beneath the Bodhi tree, and he talks to sort of wise people in the area, and he's trying to figure out a new way to govern the empire, right? A new way to rule. And so again, nonviolence and kindness toward people and animals is important. Religious tolerance is important. And the narrator says he's trying to build an empire of the spirit, right? Not of the sword, but of the spirit. And so Ashoka erects these pillars all around India, and they have his edicts on them. And an edict is like a pronouncement, a thing that the king says. Okay, so in those edicts are the idea that all people are one family, and Ashoka is kind of acting as a father. And again, the narrator says that this is an interesting thing, because again, the message isn't from God. remember when we talked about Hammurabi? Hammurabi created a law code, and at the top of his law code, he had an image of him and the god of justice. And the god of justice is giving something to Hammurabi, right? So Hammurabi's writing these laws down, but he's saying, hey, the gods allowed me to do this, right? The gods gave me the power to establish these laws. But here, Ashoka's not saying that at all, right? He's saying these are things that we should do as people, right, to alleviate suffering. And so again, he's not looking upward, he's looking outward. He's looking at people, he's not looking to the heavens. And so these ideas that the Buddhists had, the ideas that the Jains had, these religious ideas get kind of absorbed into how the state runs, into government. And again, in many modern countries, we try to separate out the state and the religion, right? Governance and religion. But here, Ashoka's kind of combining them, right? He's using these principles of the Buddhists and the Jains to figure out how he's going to try to run his empire. And again, this is all very early in the history of human civilization, right? This is thousands of years ago, where Ashoka is actually talking about human rights, right? He's talking about the idea that people should be treated a certain way simply because they're humans, right? Not because they're nobles or priests or slaves or whatever they happen to be, but he's saying people are people and they deserve certain treatment because of that. That's what human rights are, right? And so Ashoka's kind of, he hasn't called them human rights, but he's kind of, he's moving around that concept with his edicts, right? And again, a couple thousand years ago, he's doing this. And so there's all of these sort of rocks that have, or pillars that have Ashoka's edicts. You can see they're all throughout India, kind of a lot in the north, but also along the coast. And yeah, he's spreading his message, right? Spreading the word that this is how the empire will be ruled. It's pretty impressive. Okay. Anything more on Ashoka that you would like to add or ask about or discuss or propose or mention, comment on?
Was it just discovered through the Rosetta Stone?
Oh yeah, I should clarify that. So when they talk about the Rosetta Stone in the video yesterday, the Rosetta Stone itself is a piece of stone. It's a big rock that actually comes from Egypt. And so the Rosetta Stone from Egypt is the one that allows us to read hieroglyphics, because it has hieroglyphics and ancient Greek, the same thing written in two languages. And so that was kind of the key to deciphering, to being able to read hieroglyphics. So that doesn't work for India, but sometimes we like to, the Rosetta Stone was such a big deal in terms of an archaeological find and in terms of a cultural artifact, that we kind of use it metaphorically now. So, the thing that allows you to figure something out is a Rosetta Stone. And so here in the documentary, the narrator is saying, this piece of writing acted like a Rosetta Stone because it allowed James Prinsep to decipher this script and read the story of Ashoka. So in this situation here, it's kind of it's a metaphorical Rosetta Stone. In Egypt, it's like that's actually what it is. That's actually what it's called. Yeah.
I was wondering if it was just discovered through the stone, then what if it's just a stone that it was not a person?
You were thinking, what if it wasn't?
What if it wasn't a real person? What if it was just a stone?
Oh.
Or were there artifacts or something that
Well, I think these pillars, I think these edicts help to support that idea that he, created these monuments really all through India. And I suspect as well that the Greeks probably would have written about Ashoka as well. But I guess we didn't have, but they didn't mention anything about them. I wonder why. Because we knew about Chandragupta Moria from multiple sources, but not Ashoka. That's a good question. I think that's always the trick, right? Is that when you read, something from the past, are you reading history or are you reading myth? Or is it a little bit of both, right? So when we read the story of Gilgamesh is a heavily mythological story, right? There's some crazy, he's fighting mythical beasts and descending into the underworld. That's all myth stuff. But there was a real King Gilgamesh in the King's List, right? So at least that part of the story is true, that there was a king named Gilgamesh, but then the rest of it is mythological. So here with Ashoka, yeah, I'm sure that the initial question was, are we dealing with, is this a mythological story or is this a historical story? And I think probably this, in connection with other artifacts as well, have sort of supported the idea that we're not dealing with a mythical character, we're dealing with a real person. It also helps in that his story, the story of Ashoka that we know now, isn't that fantastic, right? He doesn't descend to the underworld. He doesn't battle any, strange creatures or anything like that. It's it's a story that could have happened to a person, right? And so that kind of helps out as well. But yeah, you would, in first deciphering that story of Ashoka, that would probably be your first question is are we talking about a real person or a mythological person? But I think there's enough archaeological evidence to support the idea that he's a real dude. He's a real character, not a mythological one. That's a good question, though. Okay. So this Mauryan Empire of Chandragupta and Bindusara and Ashoka is kind of going to sort of rise and then fall, right? So there's a period in which these three guys will have most of India under their central control, and then, it will kind of fall apart, right? And again, it's not that easy to rule an empire in this day and age, right? There's really no means to communicate with people in your empire. There's no reason that they should be part of your empire other than the fact that you will send in your army and kill them if they don't do what you say. So keeping large areas of land together thousands of years ago is just not that easy. And it relies on the king or the emperor to a pretty significant degree. And so here we have Chandragupta, who's got enough political connections and military might to bring most of India under his control, and things are okay under his son Bindusara, things are okay under Ashoka, but after that, the kings are less impressive. They're less determined or less weak. Maybe they just like to sit around with their harems all day and have fun, who knows? But again, they're not as good at administering an empire as these earlier three were. And so again, the empire starts to fall apart. Various kingdoms prefer to, make their own decisions and not listen to whoever the Mauryan emperor is. And so again, we have a period of political centralization and then a period of more decentralization, right? Oh yeah. And they mentioned that the wheel of Ashoka finds its way onto the Indian flag in 1949? 49? Yeah, in 1949. Okay, I've got a little bit for you to read on Buddhism and Hinduism in the Common Era. It's just a few pages with a few questions talking about the sort of evolution of Buddhism after the Buddha's death and a little bit about Hinduism and the Dharma scriptures. Okay, so I'll let you read that, just a couple of pages, and then we'll talk about it. Okay. Good morning. 93. What's that? 93, I believe. Okay, hardworking people. Maybe we'll take a quick break right now, and then when we come back, we can talk about Buddhism and Hinduism and things like that. But let's take a break first, okay? So. Okay, and we're back. So you've no doubt read and taken copious notes on the development of Buddhism in the first century and some additional information on Hinduism as well. I am kind of feeling though that the energy level here in the room is low. And it could be Thursday, it could be all kinds of things. But you do have a quiz tomorrow, and some of you who are in both my classes have 2 quizzes tomorrow to deal with. And so I think what I might do today is kind of end class a little bit early, just to give us a bit of a break, because I'm allowed to do that. And so I think maybe what I'll do is I'll end it here so you can have some time to study or do other work or have a nap or whatever you need to do, and then we'll be fresh for tomorrow. Okay. So when we pick up, so tomorrow we'll do the quiz again. If you're an online student, I'll talk to you on Microsoft Teams between 10:05 and 11. If you're a in-person student, I'll see you in here at 11 o'clock, and you'll write the quiz, five questions or so. Yeah. And then we'll have another weekend, and then on Monday we'll pick up this again, and I think we're actually coming to the end of India. I'm just gonna check where we are here. Yeah, we probably just have a couple of classes left on India, and then we move on to China, which is very interesting as well. So yeah, so the quiz, actually quiz is tomorrow, and I'm just going to review what I said. I think I said it was on classes. Yeah, 11. Yeah, 11 classes, 11 to 20 is what I said for this class. So that will cover. What does that cover? That covers mostly Egypt and Mesopotamia, I think, right? But yeah, I think that's what I'll do. I'll let you go a little bit early. You can study. We'll do the quiz tomorrow as we have before, and then Monday we'll probably have a day or 2 of India left just to kind of clean it up, and then we'll move on to China. The other thing is I'm in the middle of marking your papers, and I'll have some comments and grades for you hopefully by the end of this weekend as well. So that's my goal. Anything else we should say before I cut you loose? Thank you, benevolent leader, for ending class early. We venerate you. Yes? That's what you were all thinking? All right, I guess I'll have to accept that. Okay, so that's all for today. Pack it up. Have a nice afternoon. I'll see you tomorrow, okay?